Welcome to the Answers Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Hello and welcome to the Answers Yes podcast. Thank you again for tuning in. Man, we've got a lot of episodes in the books. If you look at my account, it's over 340 episodes of this show and a couple of others. And I've just had a fantastic time doing it with almost 67,000 subscribers and a wonderful body of work. Take some time, look back through some of those interviews. And just because you don't recognize a name because they're not a celebrity doesn't mean that the content's not going to resonate with you or help change your life and what you're doing. So take a look. We'd love to have you go back through some of those older episodes. So many of you, if you know my story, I spent my first, 15 years working in the restaurant business. And then I ultimately left there and tried to change the trajectory of where I was going and got involved with the adult spirit beverage business as the vice president of Kettle One and ultimately starting my own tequila company. But, I constantly have this pull to go back to the restaurant business. And there's this beautiful site right down the street from my house, and it's sitting dormant. Nobody's there. And I keep thinking, gosh, I sure would like to have a restaurant again. I really enjoyed that. But there's one thing that's stopping me. And this is the purpose for having today's guest. And that is, I know that if I did that, I'd become a victim and a slave to that business. It's not something that I want to be doing really in this time in my life. And the point is that it sounds exciting, and I know I would have a little bit of fun doing it, but it would not align with my values, who I am today, and what I stand for. And I certainly don't want to become a victim to the workload that would create for me. So today I've got Kevin Stansfield on the line, and he talks about just that. It's not working yourself to death. So Kevin, thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, no, it's great to be on, and good to hear a little bit more of your background. So in tequila, so it's must have had some good times, selling those wares around the world.
Well, we started in the vodka business, and we spent a little time over the pond and selling some Kettle One vodka. They're out of Holland. They started in 1691. And then, I parlayed that into a tequila business, which, was quite the grind. But let's not talk about me. Let's talk about you. And we'd love to get some background on you. I always ask our guests to tell us where things started for them. And I know you've got a compelling story about your dad overworking and ultimately what led to what you're doing today. But give us some background, please.
Yeah, so currently, if we start at where I am, I've been business coaching now for some 17 years, and the journey towards that was, I couldn't say it was planned. It went from one good thing to another good thing, and eventually sort of led here. But it's I cast the roots back into my interest in business back to when I was, I think, my early teens. And my father had a very good job. He was a finance director of a local company. And he was in his early 40s, I think, back then. And he got what we call entrepreneurial Caesarship, a little bit like you're doing now, going, should I get, I really fancy, having my own business and plotting my own course rather than, riding the juggernaut that is another, somebody else's business. He didn't have the experience, obviously, that you had of running businesses. So he wasn't asking himself that question of, do I really want to become a slave to the business that I'm going to buy? But he bought a business off a man in a pub. It was a sign company. He'd never, he wasn't a sign person. He was, he sort of thought himself as being a business person. And he started running that business, and through my early teens I grew up with a father that was what we thought was an entrepreneur. I've learned over the years that he was far from an entrepreneur. He was just a good guy trying to make a living running a business. And but what I saw was, from my early age where he had a job. He'd be back at 5:30 of an evening. We would have some time. We would all eat as a family, around the dining room table. He would be around for weekends. We had, good holidays, 4 holidays a year. We had quite a nice pattern of a life. And then this business came on. It was like having almost an affair with somebody else, that suddenly he was up very, very early. He was back very, very late. Weekends were spent predominantly working at the factory. Sundays were about doing books. And I just sort of saw that relationship with my father sort of disappear over those years, to a point where I think I was sort of about to leave school. And I think he sort of deep down, he never said it, but deep down wanted me to come and work in the family business. And I just thought, why would I want to do that? It's killing you. It was a much better when you were doing your job. So I decided to become a chartered accountant. Went to university, did my practice. Went into practice with a view that I would become a partner in a small provincial accountancy firm. And that was my goal. I set out on that goal, very clear in my mind what I wanted to achieve, who I needed to be, what I needed to do to get there. And I was 28 years old, and the senior partner who I'd sort of joined with was retiring. Partnership for this sort of small provincial practice was there. And I just looked at it and went, I don't want this anymore. I've got to that point where, all I can see now, 28 years, this is the next 30 years of my life. And in 30 years, I'm going to be exactly as I am now. And I actually still keep in touch with the guys that are running that practice. And they are exactly now as they were 30 years ago. They have not changed one iota. So I had a lucky break there. I said yes to somebody else. I said yes to one of my clients who wanted me to come and join them to help grow their business. And it was a couple of brothers, fourth generation horticulturalists, so growing flowers. And we were just starting selling the supermarkets. We saw a need selling flowers into supermarkets. So I came on board as their finance director. Big risk, leaving behind, what would have been that sort of back then the dream position, to take a gamble on a business that had no real proof, no track record, but it just seemed like a fun thing to do. And we had great fun building that to about a 4 million turnover business in 4 years. And then that led me to working with another company that was doing something similar around the country. So I then became a freelance finance director working for them as well, because I just got bored, working for one company. I wanted more of a challenge. And I did that for another 10 years, built multi-million-pound businesses, employing 400 people. And I had a great time building them. But once they got big, I got bored. It's the same thing, and I wanted that challenge of growth, of new, of dynamic, of even making mistakes. And some of the businesses grew, and then we had to lay off. I think the largest redundancy we made was 50 people, sort of pretty much overnight. We lost a big contract, and so you start playing the game, what I call playing the game of business. And it's like snakes and ladders. If you played snakes and ladders with a view that every time you went down a snake, you'd give up the game, well, you wouldn't play anymore. So if you treat business as being a game where you go up ladders and you come down snakes, but the goal is to get to the end. And that was the big thing in business, that, I'd done this, but no one defines what the end goal is. It's you probably come across a guy called Simon Sinek, and he wrote a book called The Infinite Game, where he calls business is an infinite game. It has no ending. And any game that has no ending, if you don't put endings in it, if you don't put milestones in it, then it just becomes a chore. Do you play any sports, Jim?
Oh yeah, yep. No, I'm a competitive Spartan
sport?
racer. Yeah, competitive Spartan racer, and you got to find the finish line.
Spartan, what's Spartan racing?
Yeah, it's
for us.
It's an obstacle race course. So you're running.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. You have it over there.
Yeah, we have. The sort of like what's the mud race where you have to go over obstacles and through mud and
tough mudder.
Tough mudder. That's it. So imagine you're in a Spartan race, that goes on forever, goes on for 30 years, it never ends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you'd give up pretty soon, wouldn't you? You'd do it if you had to do it, if you were paid to do it. But if there's no goal, it's the actual completion of the goal that makes those things fun. So I've done it. It was hard work. I completed it. I take a break, and then I start again. I do it again, and I do it again and do it again. But unless there's a defined end game, then whatever you do in life becomes tedious. And that's what happens in business. And what I'd seen that for me, because I was sort of an employee, when I got bored, I just left that job and got another job, which is more exciting. And then I left that job and got another job. Okay, I was working for myself, but it was still the same principles around that. And by this time, my father, after 15 years, his business had hit a bit of a rocky patch, and unfortunately, it didn't make it through. So this sort of asset, this thing that he built for himself, and for his family as well, suddenly just was gone overnight. And that makes you realize that the longer you stay in the game, the more chance of failure you've got. So going back to your point there of should I take this restaurant on, I'd say, yeah, great. But have a goal for it, have an end game for it. Maybe that's 1-2 years. Right, I'll get it, I'll set it up, I'll get it running, so at least I've got somewhere local I can go and have a good whatever you want to eat, and then I'll sell it to somebody else. And then you start another chapter, another way to go. It's when people look at their business as being, this is my life, this is the next 20-30 years, that's when you get problems with businesses. Now, it's not to say you can't continue, because some businesses go on forever, but you've got to have that ability to choose at some stage whether I choose to play the game or I choose not to play the game. And that's why we always say when you have a business, you're building it with the view that at some point you can sell it. So either it'll work without you, so you could, in your case, you could have the restaurant and it runs and you go in when you want to and you don't go in when you don't want to, or you build it so that you can actually sell it on. And that's where the majority of people in business get it wrong, is because all they do is buy themselves a job, and then they can't actually quit that job because, it's theirs. If they quit, then there is no business, and they always think that they're unemployable as well. So,
it's interesting. I also work with a lot of clients that are entrepreneurs and startups. How many of them come to me without a plan, not even the basic business plan to get into business. And most of the time they've already started and have created a little bit of damage. Not only are you talking about a plan, but you're also talking about the exit plan, which it's almost rare that people do that. And I find it baffling myself. So what you're saying is resonating. And I'm just really hoping that people are listening to what you're talking about. How do you work with clients when they come to you without an exit plan or a business plan? Because it seems to be regular.
Well, and I liken it to building a house. So if I came to you and said, Jim, look, I want to build this house. Yeah. You wouldn't suddenly go, right, okay, brilliant. Well, I'll start laying some bricks then.
Yeah.
And then you get halfway through building a house and going, is that what you wanted? Well, no, it's not really what I wanted. I wanted it bigger than that, or smaller than that, or, higher than that, or more bedrooms, So the first thing when somebody comes to me and says, right, how can you help me? I say, well, the first thing is, where are you going to go? What does this business look when it's done? And the majority of people to that will have no idea. People have had multiple businesses generally, as like you're saying, I want to be able to visualize what I want to build here. But the majority of business people, don't, because the reason, like my father, he did a business that provided him the life he had, or he had the business, plus the autonomy to feel in control of it. Well, because that's what a business paid him and he had the autonomy he wanted to do. So it took him about 3 to 5 years to build that. And then he carried on running that for the next 10 years. What he didn't then do was set another goal, which was, right, now it's providing me what I want. Where do I go next? So I always say to clients, look, my job is to help you reverse engineer your business.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you want to be in 5-10 years time? What's the personal goal here? Do you want to be financially free? If you do, then how much do you need in order to be financially free? And the maths are quite simple. If you want to live off a $50,000 income, you need £1 million invested. So in stocks and shares, in property, in other businesses, but you're going to need around about £1 million. So $1 million. If you want 100,000, you need $2 million. It's a simple 5% return on investment. So if you want $1 million, to give you 50, which is not a huge amount, they say a good standard of living these days is about $70,000 a year. So even that's not, brilliant. But you've got to build your business so you can sell it for $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what would it look like if it was at a point where it was worth $1 million? Now, the majority of people's businesses are unsellable because without them, there is no business. The accountant that does the books and charges has no business. They just have a job. So we have to look at the size of the business, what it is, what it would sell on the open market, type of people who would likely buy it, those people who are looking for that sort of business, what would they want within that business? And it's generally, a selection of good people and good processes. That's all McDonald's is. It's a number of good processes, a number of good people. And stick a brand on there as well. But the majority of businesses out there, small businesses, are not going to be sold for their brand because unless you are big and it means something, you're spending loads of money on advertising, your brand doesn't count for anything. So what they're buying is your ability to make them happy, deliver what they actually want. So that's really the starting point is, what do you want personally? So what's your personal goals? Is it time? Is it money? Is it independence? And that for a lot of people is tough to get that out of them, to really pull, because they've never spent any time thinking about what they want for themselves, where they're going to be in 5-10 years time.
Right.
And then once we know what the business will need to look like, then we can just reverse engineer it and say, right, well, if it needs to be sold for $1 million, it's probably to be turning over at least $1 million in sales. And therefore, if we're starting at $500,000, we've got to double it and put the people and processes in place that it can work without the owner. So the beauty is, once you've got to that point and it's making, let's say, $250,000 per year in revenues, in profit, you might decide, well, actually, I don't need to sell it now because it's providing me, I don't have to work in it, and it's providing me $200,000-300,000 a year. But when that person comes along and says there's 5 million for it, then what I always say to people is bite their hand off. Because I've seen so many people that have waited and say, oh, that's not quite enough. And they wait another 1-2 years and then the market collapses and then there is no business.
Right.
I do a little thing with a lot of clients and say, look, write down on a piece of paper how much you would accept for your business right now that would solve all your problems, would make you could have a really good life with that amount of money. So write it down, put it in an envelope, put it in the top drawer in your office. And when somebody comes and offers you an amount of money, check it to that amount of money. And if it's that amount or more, then just do the deal. Don't sit there waiting. Oh, yeah, but it could be worth a bit more. Yeah, it's worth what you did. So take the money, cash your chip, and then decide to the. I always think it's like playing poker. Good poker players know when to walk away. Bad poker players stay and chasing the money.
Well,
and they're the ones that lose their shirt.
And sometimes it might not just be the market that collapses around your business. It might just be your own ability to be sustainable and have that drive that had got you there in the first place. It might be time to hand it off to somebody else that we'll be invigorated and have the energy to take it to the next level. It's such a common mistake. You see people staying too long and then they dip back down, and they might not be able to sell it at all.
I was with this afternoon. I was with a really nice guy. He's well in his 70s, and he's sort of saying, well, I think I'm ready to sort of, retire. And I'm thinking, well, you should have planned this 10 years ago. It's just no good doing now. It's like, it's going to take us 5 years to sort all the mess that you've created around you. And COVID is one thing COVID has done is made me, but a lot of people realize that actually life is precious. What we do with our time with family, where we spend it. It's not just about, working and, all hours and then hoping that at some time in the future, we're going to enjoy our life. And I say this to, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, being successful in business age does not matter at all. Okay, you can do it at any age, and it's not, it doesn't worry about your race, your creed, it's a completely level playing field. But you've got to go into it with real clarity of what you want out of it. Otherwise, it'll eat you up.
Kevin, what you're suggesting seems pretty straightforward. In other words, if somebody's listening right now, it's not too hard to figure out, the common sense behind what you're telling people. But what about the business owners, the entrepreneurs that have that laundry list of, but Kevin, that doesn't apply to my business, and they have that list of things of reasoning why it doesn't apply to them. At the end of the day, is there just some basic principles that people can follow? I look at it like, hey, work hard, work your plan, stay the course, etc. But how do you advise those people to have the list of buts that they can't do what you're suggesting?
Well, the first thing you say is get your big fat butt out of the way. I suppose I've learned over the years that there are people that do, and there's people that whinge about it. And I've sort of given up trying to convince those people that whinge about it, because whatever you do, they're going to whinge about it anyway. Well, the people that do it, there's a guy called Clive Woodward. I don't know if you know Clive Woodward. He's was a coached the England rugby team to World Cup success in 2003, and he's a great guy if you get to sort of read his books and listen about sort of creating a winning team. And he said there's two types of people in life: there are rocks and there's sponges. He says you can't do anything with rocks. Whatever you throw at them bounces off. Sponges absorb. They just want to know. They want to know how to improve, how to be. And it's almost a case of, look, guys, if you're not a sponge, if you're not sitting there going, okay, how do I get better? How do I get better? And take in information, then there's no hope for you. You're going to be exactly where you are in 5-10 years time. So for the sponges, it's not really an issue, because it's a case of almost a big thing there is, where do you start? Okay, because if you've got a big long list of things that you want to do, you've got to, the only way to do that is you've got to start somewhere. That's why we're called Action Coach, because action is a big part of helping people to move forward. If you don't take action and do something, and sometimes it really doesn't matter where you start, just start. You'll see that when I've written my books, which I'm sure we'll come on to sort of later, but you get writer's block. So you think, what do you write? And it's the way that the human brain is organized, that your neocortex, your thinking brain, is actually quite slow. And so it just sort of it hits this block because it's trying to overanalyze things. It's trying to say, what's the best thing I can do? What's the one that's going to be the most successful? And when there isn't the best thing, or there isn't the most successful, it can't deal with that. So it goes in this little loop, and it can't get out of the loop. And then you just get really frustrated. And then the reptilian brain comes in, and you get angry, and you throw things around, and then you're completely lost because your animal brain has taken over from you. So what they say is, when you get writer's block like that, then just write something.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what you write. It doesn't matter what you do. Just start somewhere and do something. Okay. So the first thing I would say is if you've got a list, great, start at the top. Okay. It doesn't matter what it is. Don't overanalyze it. Just do something. And then once you start doing something, that frees up the brain to then go, right, okay, so what's the next thing I could do? What's the next thing I can do? Okay. So if you've got a list, start on the list. If you don't have a list, then it's because you're lacking the information of what you need to move forwards. Okay. And going back to the person who says, oh, my business is not like any other business, what do you, because I did get that all the time, not all the time, but I go into clients and I say, what can you tell me about my business? I've been running it for 30 years and you don't know, we're different to other businesses. I go, okay, no, you're not. Yeah. Every human being is unique. Yeah. But every human being shares 99.99% of the chromosomes of every other business. And in fact, I think we share about 70% of the same chromosomes as a banana. Okay. So we are not unique. And every business is not unique. Underneath, they're identical. There's 4 key areas to any business. There's your finance and admin. Okay. So your numbers. Mm-hmm. Because without numbers, you have no business. It's like saying, within baseball, you can't play baseball unless you can keep the score. Baseball without scoring is just pointless. Some people say baseball's a bit pointless anyway, but it's a bit like the English and cricket. So you've got to know how to score and what to score. So that's number 1. Number 2 is sales and marketing. If you can't sell stuff, you don't have a business. Mm-hmm. Number 3 is operations, so which is delivery. So can you deliver what you sold? And number 4 is people. Every business is just a group of people and processes. Mm-hmm. So underneath every single business is finance, is sales and marketing, is operations, and is people. And that's it. Everything else is one of those. It's an extension. It's more detailed to one of those. And you can overlay those 4 things to any business in the world. So therefore, if you break it down to 4, you just look at that and go, right, where's my priority? If I don't know my numbers, and I'm short of cash and things like that, then I suggest you work on your finance. If you need growth, if you need more sales, then it's sales and marketing. If you can't deliver what you're already selling, it's operations. And if you're working too many hours in your business, then it's people. So choose one of them. Doesn't matter which one it is. I don't care. But find one that is the priority for you and then look into that one and go, right, is there anything I know I should be doing? Then just do it. And if you're looking at it and going, well, it's sales and marketing, and I've tried everything I possibly know about sales and marketing, and I still can't grow this business. Then what you need is more knowledge. You need more education. You need somebody that's not in your business to actually give you that information to actually help you identify where to go. And that's what I do a lot for clients. Once we've done the plan, I always say what my job is: formulation, where we're going to go and how we're going to get there. Education is you don't know what you don't know. And implementation is occasionally you need to kick up the backside. You need somebody to hold you accountable to actually do what you said you're going to do, but you're too blooming lazy to actually do it.
I appreciate how you've articulated, some of the simplest of terms as it relates to business, but it's so complex for people to understand that because they're in their own way. So it's nice to bring it all the way back home to 4 basic points. And you're right. I mean, I've interviewed people on this show from around the world in every small nook and cranny. And business is the same here in the United States as it is in Europe and in Russia. I had someone from Russia last month, or India. They're pretty basic. So thank you for redefining that for our listeners, and maybe they can get off their butts. Briefly, you've got 3 books out. Tell us what the titles of the books are, and I'll make sure that I've got your website on our show notes, but I'd love for people to pick up the books and understand a little bit more about what you do.
Brilliant. So the first book I wrote was called The Big Dipper, How to Survive the Roller Coaster Ride of Business Ownership. And that's based on my father's journey. So it's he's one of the characters in the book. And it's done in 3 parts. There's a story bit, because I've always enjoyed story books, story business books. And then there's the science behind it. So why that actually happens, why certain things happen within a business's journey. And then for those that can't be bothered to read, there's 3 actions that you can just do, and don't bother reading it. You can just do the 3 actions. So that's on Amazon. I also did the audio of that. So it's if you prefer to listen, then you read it. Your listeners can actually download that on Audible. And I've done a bit of the narration, but I've got a professional storyteller to do the story part as well. And then the other one, if you've got anybody that's enjoys their golf, during the lockdown I couldn't play golf, so I wrote a book on the similarities of golf and business. And that's called The Great Game. How lessons from the great game of golf can help you win the equally great game of business. And it's, even if you're not into golf, it's about the sport and business analogy. The similarities between playing the game of golf, playing the game of business. And it's I quite enjoy doing it. It's a little bit tongue in cheek at places, but if you come at business in the same way as you come at a sport, then you're going to be far, far more successful. And that's why I always say with coaching, if you're a great athlete and you want to be a better athlete, then you go and get a coach. You'd be crazy not to get a coach. So why is the not the same with business owners? You start a business and you think that you should be able to do it better than anybody else, and unless you've got that mindset that you're open to learning, getting mentors, getting coaches, then I don't think you're ever going to achieve your full potential.
Yeah, agree. Well, Kevin, I want to thank you for spending some time with us today and imparting some wisdom and just some of the basics, because oftentimes we want it to be more complex than what it is. And some days it's just not that hard. So calling in, I like to say over the pond, Action Coach Business Coaching with Kevin Stansfield. So thank you so much for being here today.
That's lovely, Jim. It'd be great to be on. And as I always say, keep it simple, stupid. So,
still applies today.
Thank you for listening to today's show. It is my pleasure and honor to interview all of the guests that have been on the Answer is Yes podcast. If you have enjoyed the show, please go on iTunes and subscribe, give a rating, or simply tell a friend about the show. We also believe in the message of our guests and the positive influence of their stories. As my own mentor and coach, David Meltzer, has taught me, spend some time every day thinking and writing about the things in your own life that you have more than enough of. You will find out how blessed we really are. Please visit my website, livelifedriven.com, for the latest updates about me and what I'm doing. Plus, I post a monthly blog about the many topics on this show. This podcast can also be found there. As I learned early on in life, what you believe is what you will achieve. Thanks, Mark Victor Hansen, and thank you, and have a great week.